Spartans, welcome back. It's your boy Leonidas, aka Bladesong81, aka Chess.com community streamer. Call the police, call an ambulance, but not for me, because there was a murder on the 64 squares last night. Best out of three, games 1 and 3, I won. We drew game number 2, so technically it's not best out of 3. Sue me. You're going to see some cool moves, a very big blunders by opponent, two different tactical errors that he made, and I just hope you guys enjoy. On the road to 100 subscribers. Love you guys. Appreciate all the support. Hope you guys can laugh at him, laugh at me at thinking I'm good at chess. But more importantly, I hope we can all come together and give chess what it deserves because it's taken up so much of our time, and we should take up some of our. Bro, what is this intro? Bye. All right, this first game starts very easily. It starts with the Scandinavian defense. Scandinavian defense is after my opponent pushes his e pawn. I respond by pushing my d pawn. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna turn off the lines here. Feedback, I should say. I take with my queen, and I do the standard move, which is putting your queen on a5. You can also put your queen down to a7 or d7, excuse me. But I decide not to. He decides to attack it. I realize, okay, I want to put a nice little cubby hole for my queen. So after he attacks, I can slide that thing back. I go for it, and we continue to develop. Put my knight out. I want to get my knights connected here, and then potentially start developing my bishop out here, just in case he wants to castle out here. I'm thinking there's no way that he's not castling his king side, so I want to maybe get my bishop out there to figure out exactly what he's planning on doing. But after he takes and I take, he pushes his queen out of the way. Don't know exactly at this point what he's doing. The eval bar is negligible at this point. It's 0.02. Prior to that king move, it was 0.0. So it was even. He moves his queen, gives me a slight advantage. I decide to continue to develop to try to potentially attack this at some point if that knight decides to move. At which point, my opponent blunders the game away immediately by castling queenside. The reason that this is a blunder is because he's already pushed these two pawns out, and amongst other things, I have my queen and these pawns ready to start barreling down, which is exactly what happens. I push this, realize that if he takes, I can just get my queen involved here, dial him up with the rook, and can attack. He takes, I take, he tries to slide back to defend, at which point it is now mate and 3 on the board. All that I need to do is give a check. He has to take, he cannot move his king. He takes, I give him check, he moves to the b1 square, and I wrap this up by either going to one of two spaces. It would be mate in 2 if I go here, but a mate in 1 with the next move. And that is how I beat this dude in 15 moves. I will see you guys in the next game we played. All right, for this game, chess.com has me at a 91% and my opponent at an 82% accuracy. They have me at a 1500 and my opponent at an 1150. So this game starts with the Nimzo declined Williams variation. Should pawns put nines out, I immediately go to try to pin this knight right here. At which point my opponent decides not to push his h pawn to kick my bishop out, which gives me time to develop my pieces, and again gives me time to develop this knight so I can now attack this knight for free. At which point my opponent finally decides to try to push my bishop out, but it is a little too late for my opponent because I give him a check. He has to take with his pawn, and I love when I give my opponent double pawns. Double pawns is just this greatest feeling for me when I'm playing an opponent because it opens up so many opportunities, and it puts them in a very uncomfortable position. Because with double pawns, say sometime in the future, actually not no time in the future, it could be now. I could just at some point try to reroute my knight here and this outpost. It'd be very difficult for my opponent to kick this knight out. Yes, he could push here, but with a couple extra moves, I could defend this outpost. But if you can get double pawns, especially away from an outpost, you can keep that thing there forever. So I decided to drop back, which again was the best move. My opponent decides to try to trade bishops, at which point I ignore. I realize, why waste a move? I could take this bishop, but I'm giving up. I don't know if it's called tempo or whatever it's called, but if I know I'm already going to lose this bishop, why not take a move to continue developing my pieces instead of taking this and giving him an opportunity to develop his knight here? At which point he takes. I take with my queen, barreling down here. My opponent decides to castle again. This dude really has a masochistic view of castling towards the opening. If you recall last game, he castled queenside after he pushed both his B and A pawns out to B4 respectively and out to A3 respectively. Also had this knight out here. So all these 4 squares here were continuously and completely open. As you can see here, my opponent has this G file open. So this was the big blunder of the game. It didn't blunder it straight away. It went from 0.3 to 1.8, but it still set the stage for a insurmountable amount of pressure. As you can see, my next move was immediately taking this pawn, forever planting my queen here to be a nuisance. The next plan, obviously, is to try to get this rook involved at some point, potentially get these pawns pushed, as you will see here in a moment. My opponent tries to reroute the knights, obviously not the best move. I go ahead and I do the only move that should happen, is I decide to try to defend this A, B, C, D, E, F, F4 square, because if he can get here, he could potentially kick my queen out, and I don't want that, so I defend that square. He jumps there anyway, and now he completely loses the game. It goes from 1.8 to a 3.4. I take, trade off equal material. He takes. This was a mistake. I could have, and I should have pushed this pawn to G5, but I figured, why do I want to push that now when I can defend it with this H pawn? He decides to push back, and now I take over, and my initial plan was just to start pushing these pawns. It wasn't to do anything spectacular as far as trying to take the knight. I just want to get here. I want to eventually trade this pawn off so I can put this rook over here and try to get towards checkmate. My opponent allows for me to take. I take more than willing to take, because now I can put this rook out here, but my opponent is smart. He does the best move. He takes this pawn with his bishop. I give a check, and he does the only move that does not lose the game immediately, is blocking with his bishop. My opponent, actually, the next few moves, you can see he plays the best move to try to defend against checkmate, because my plan was to take this pawn and push it and kick this bishop out. But my opponent, he makes a... It's not the best move. The best move for him would have been to take this pawn, put pressure on this rook, causing me to have to move this rook out of the way. But at this point, this game is pretty much over. So he puts his queen on G2. I trade, at which point I realize I can push this pawn forward now, and it is pinned because obviously if he would move his bishop, he would be in check, and you can't put yourself in check in chess, for those of you who are newer. So I put my rook in line with his bishop and his king are ready to attack and devastate this already weakened position. He does an okay choice. At this point, any move besides checkmate in one is a decent move. I take the bishop, he takes the pawn, and now I am going for the attack. I move my bishop out of the way, or so I can start connecting these rooks as well. And then also potentially putting some pressure on this pawn out here. My opponent decides to try to defend that pawn. I'm going to put PP on the PP, as Gotham Chess would say. You put pressure on the pinned piece. This pawn is already pinned, but if I just took that pawn with this rook, there would be a dumb idea because he could have taken it with his king. But now with his bishop out here, he cannot take with his king. He decides to try to defend it with his rook, which again is the best move. At which point I move my rook out to G4 to continue to put pressure on this piece, but also have some ideas of taking this pawn in the future. He decides to move his pawn out of the way so he can now release his rook to try to defend. I line up my rooks. He moves his king out of the check. I take. He takes. I take with a check, so I could potentially try to catch him in something else. What was the best move here? Best move was to take with okay. The best move was to take with the rook because I could take with this potentially with check at some point in the future if he's not careful, but it's only it would move my eval from 5.6 to 6.8 or 6.08, so negligible at this point. But I take with the bishop, moves his king out of the way. I go back to my outpost, continue to have the scope and having a little wooden shield here, a little classic wooden shield allowing me to survey the entire battlefield. And at this point, it is just a matter of conversion, taking with the right pieces, moving my king to attack these eventually. He decides to try to move his rook out to the f5 square eventually. I take, infiltrate my bishop, and this is taking with the right pieces because if I take with this piece, he comes down. He can attack from behind here. I don't want that to happen, so I take with the correct order of pieces. I take, he moves, I take, and now this diamond formation, this coveted diamond formation, is not going anywhere. And now, after a couple moves, I take his pawn. My opponent resigns because the police arrived on scene moments ago. The medics gave a diagnosis, and they said that this man should retire from chess after the beatdown that he took. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace.